What could you do to protect your pets if you're sick or injured? My product, Save My Pet ID tag, helps you ensure that your beloved pets are safe and well cared for, even when life isn't what you expect.
What are some things you should never do? I have a 35-pound dog, Kona, and I have an 8-pound dog, Emma. I try to make sure that Emma is not a purse my ride dog. She's a dog, or on the floor. Is it good or bad if a dog's approaching to pick up that little dog?
Well, so there's a risk involved if you pick up that little dog because the dog that's coming at you could potentially jump up. Now, that being said, if you're near something where you can pick up your dog and put him on something, like put him on a car or put him on a trash can, that might actually be a little bit better than just picking them up and folding them. But I will say there is a risk there. Now, the downside, though, is if your dog gets attacked and is on the ground, there's a risk there, too, that your dog, especially if it's a large dog, can injure a small dog so easily. So I do know that people end up saying, I'm just going to take the risk and pick them up. But I would say try to pick
you don't have your hands free.
Right. Then that's the other problem is now you really can't do anything because you're basically like wielding your body with your dog in it. So I always say if you want to pick your dog up, try to pick them up and put them like on a car or in the back of a truck
or on over a fence maybe or something.
Right,
Make sure it's not a big dog on the other side.
Exactly. I did have a client once that put her dog in the trash can and closed the lid. So I kind of thought that was and it worked. The dog just left them after her dog was in the trash can, but she did get it out afterwards, obviously. But if you have someplace like that where you can pick up and put on something, that could help.
I like the cars because you always heard in the old days, oh, just get a garden hose. Where the heck is a garden hose on a sidewalk? And you're not going to have a little squirt gun. That's not going to do anything.
A lot of people do use the water method or they always recommend it. But I have found that unless you have something like a water hose, just a bottle of water generally isn't enough of a deterrent to get the dog to stop. So I don't really recommend that unless, you happen to be walking by and someone's watering their yard. I suppose you could grab the hose and do it, but that's just not as likely to happen.
What about sounds? And I know there's companies that make that burst of air. Are those things effective? Because you do look like a gunslinger if you've got your little mini umbrella and your little air spray. What's your take on those things?
I do think those can be very effective. Again, though, that any dog that's hearing that sound, it's going to punish all the dogs, which means your dog is probably going to hear that as well. So it's another tool that if you're going to use it, you might want to make sure that it's not going to affect your dog. But we do recommend those. And they're small marine air horns, like for boating.
Yeah.
And you can buy them at boating stores. So it is, if you have an environment where there's just constantly dogs around, like loose dogs all the time, it's not a bad tool. But the thing I would be worried about, especially if you have a dog that has kind of sound sensitivities, like a lot of the herding breeds don't really like those loud noises. It's really, really loud. So your dog is going to be affected as well. That's the downside to it.
Yeah. And the dog is, if you can get your dog behind you, how do you calm down? Now, Emma, I love her. First little tiny dog I've ever had, but she squeaks like, Henry, come here and help me. Which would be like, I can't find the mute button on her. How do I calm my dog to lower the reactivity being read by the dog coming our way?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the things that I do recommend is as much as possible, get your dog out and start to get them used to being in the presence of other dogs. They don't necessarily have to play with every dog, but just getting them used to being around so it's not such a big, whoa, never happens. I never see dogs kind of thing. One of the tools I do like to use with my own dogs is to toss treats on the ground. And if they're really, really high value treats, I want my dog to go, oh, wow, there's like all these treats on the ground. Lowering their head can sometimes send a signal to that other dog that they're not a threat and keeps them preoccupied as well because they're eating stuff. But I would work on a lot of that outside of the context of, oh, right this second, there's a loose dog coming.
And I like that you say more than just one treat, because sometimes people get the misunderstanding. You're walking with your dog, sit and give them a treat. Okay, keep walking, sit and get a treat. but you're kind of sprinkling that because what does that do to the dog's mind seeing a jackpot on the sidewalk?
Exactly. They basically are now in a different mindset. They're saying, whoa, there's like all this stuff going on. And it helps to distract them from, focusing on something else, and can get them to settle down. Just the fact that they're now eating treats and are able to eat treats, it's going to help to calm them down. Sort of like comfort food for us, I suppose.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I do know sometimes a person means well and a dog pops out of their front door because it was left ajar, or they do have the dog on the leash and the dog gets free and the dog is coming. Now you've got the person behind them going, any advice for how we calm down the human?
it's the same kind of thing as just trying, if your dog is friendly. So I had a situation where a dog ran up to my dog and I could tell the dog coming was friendly. He was very exuberant, and I also knew at that point my dog was friendly too. The owner was completely flipping out, but I did just tell her it's fine. Like, I don't think anything's going to happen. But if a fight breaks out, it's very hard for you to watch your dog in that situation and also try to be kind or polite in that moment to the other person. So sometimes it's just a matter of saying, let's just deal with this later. Like, make sure your dog is safe, do whatever, first aid you might need to do on your dog, and then figure out who that owner is and go back and talk to them later. Because I do think sometimes in the heat of the moment, if something bad happens, you just aren't going to have the presence of mind yourself to stop.
What about, they are in a rumble and we know not to grab the collar because we want to keep our hands.
Right.
What can we do? Throw a jacket over? And what would you recommend? Because there is that proverbial garden hose again is not available.
Exactly. There's two things. One is if you have something to throw over the dog's head, that is probably one of the safer options. It's just if it's the middle of summer and it's, California, you might
don't
not
get naked.
Exactly. I'm not necessarily saying take all your clothes off, but if you have a coat on, taking that off and throwing it over the head, a lot of times will startle the dogs enough that they'll separate because they're suddenly in the dark. The other tool that, again, you're going to look a little bit like the sling, you're carrying all this stuff on your belt, but another tool, they do sell a citronella based spray that, again, if you're in an environment where this happens a lot, it might be a tool that you could use. And it's similar. It's kind of like mace or a bear spray where, it's an unpleasant scent and an unpleasant feeling for the dogs. Again, it's not going to kill them, but they're not going to like it. But you can spray that type of a spray as a deterrent, either as dogs on coming up to you, or if your dog does get into a tussle with another dog. If you have to separate them, I don't recommend, like you said, grabbing their collar. The last resort for me is kind of to grab their hind legs, but knowing that as soon as you do that, the animal is most likely going to come back at you because you've now picked up their back legs. So that's always a last resort in my mind.
We want people to learn more about this new parent component you've added. So tell us that. We just have a few seconds left. I can't believe it. We got to have you back, Robin.
Sure.
Please say yes. Get you on the record. Yes. So how do people find out more about the Roughly Speaking Dog and the Dog Guru?
Yes. So if you're a pet care business, definitely check us out at thedoggurus.com. And for pet parents who want to build a stronger bond with your dog, you can go to roughly-speaking-dog.com.
And what's one thing, you've had many dogs in your life. You got a new one, Ranger, who's a barn hunter. What's something Ranger has taught you to make you a better human?
He has taught me that I do not always know the things he's going to love. And I've just tried things and I've been surprised sometimes that he loves certain things that I thought, wow, I never thought he would like that. So it's worth experimenting with stuff that your dog might want to do.